WAC Hoops All Access with the one and only WAC Hoops Digest expert, Kyle McDonald. Kyle, how you doing today, man?
I'm great, Brian. It's a busy Thursday morning here as we get set for. We got a full slate today of WAC hoops games, so I'm really stoked. We haven't had this for a couple weeks now, and
No doubt.
COVID has kind of reared its ugly head at times, and so I'm excited. There's some good basketball to be played, not just tonight, but this weekend around the Western Athletic Conference.
Yeah, very good stuff coming up. We won't waste a lot of time. We're going to get to it so we can go ahead and get this out before all these games happen. So let's talk about, from going backwards a little bit, a couple of surprises maybe, or even just a couple games you want to highlight before we kind of dive into the tiers of the conference.
So, the surprise, obviously, Sam Houston, 5-1 in conference play. We're not going to beat around the bush with that one.
Especially the way they started. Not so much because of their program, not to jump in, but because of the way they started the season.
Right.
You expect them to come into the WAC, which is so strong this year and has even more teams to do as well as they are. But sorry, continue.
Well, they only had 2 Division I wins in the non-conference slate.
And one of them was right before the break with North Carolina Central, correct?
Yep, down there in the Sun Bowl Invitational, yep. Right before WAC play started against NC Central, and they've started 5-1 in WAC play. People will say, well, they beat Lamar, they beat UTRGV, but they also won at Abilene Christian. They beat Stephen F. Austin. So, they're playing some of their best basketball.
They have a resume. It's legit.
It is.
You talk about Stephen F. Austin, who's been one of the better teams in the Southland, who's also a rival. So throw everything else out. If it's a rival, and we know how good of a job Coach Keller has done there since he's been there. So that was a big win. Abilene Christian, they've been kicking butt and taking names the whole preseason. Their preseasons are almost opposites, to be honest. Abilene Christian really got rolling, Sam Houston, but then for them to win that game on the road. So, yeah, Sam Houston, I would agree with you on that.
Yeah,
what else did you see?
Seattle's flying under the radar. We talked to DeMarcus Tyson the other day, and they're just flying under the radar 4-0 quietly in WAC play. And, they got a big road trip this week, too, to Abilene Christian and to Tarleton. So we'll see what the Red Hawks do. The rest of it's kind of what we kind of expected. New Mexico State, Grand Canyon are kind of at the top. Obviously, they're playing their best basketball, 15-2 and 14-2.
Let's talk about the top tier. Tell me what you think about the top tier so far. Let's say the top 4 teams in the standings, which would be Grand Canyon, New Mexico State, Seattle, and Sam Houston, correct?
Yep, absolutely.
Let's talk about that top tier, the top 4.
Well, I think we're all living in New Mexico State and Grand Canyon's world right now. It's just I want to say they're head and shoulders above everybody. Grand Canyon shot 53%, 60%, and 53% in their last 3 games. They put up 93 points on Abilene Christian, who doesn't give up that many points ever. They're shooting the lights out. New Mexico State, Teddy Allen, Jabari Rice, Johnny McCants, Clayton Henry's back, Donnie Tillman's back. They're deep. They're healthy. They're the deepest team in the WAC. They're the most veteran-led team as well. So it's just – and both Grand Canyon and New Mexico State are in the top 70 of the NCAA net, and they're in the top 100 of the Ken Pom rankings. So just 2 teams that are really playing well right now. Then you got Sam Houston with Savion Flagg, but they're also getting contributions all over the floor. Javion May, Jaden Ray, Tristan Ipe. They're just finding their groove with their chemistry, and it's been impressive to watch so far. They have a statement week this week, Brian, with New Mexico State and Grand Canyon both coming to Huntsville. So that's huge for the Bearcats to maybe make a statement and say, you know what, we belong in the conversation for the top tier of the WAC. Like I said, they played Lamar and UTRGV. So, they got the wins over Abilene Christian and Stephen F. Austin, but people are still kind of on I want to say on the edge of their seat, seeing if Sam Houston is, part of that top tier. And then Seattle, quietly just 4-0 in WAC play, best start to the conference, that they've had. Darian Trammell, Riley Grigsby, Cameron Tyson have all been really good.
Yep.
They go to Abilene Christian tonight, and that should be an intriguing matchup because it's 2 teams with similar lineups.
Yep.
And, it's just a fun league. And we'll get to talking a little bit about the other tiers, but like,
Yeah,
it's wild.
The top is really impressive right now. To have 3 undefeated teams is impressive. Sam Houston's obviously played really well. I throw everything out. The preseason conferences, as a coach, conference is what matters.
Yep,
you can do whatever you want preseason, but who cares until you get to conference play, because this is what it's all about. So give them credit. They're playing their best basketball right now. Obviously, kind of a lot of new guys. You know, they lose the player of the year last year. We're able to replace the talent level with Flag. They do it differently, and then add a lot of new pieces. And then I love what Seattle's done. You know, they can really score. They can shoot the ball. They have 3 really good guards, and they have the right pieces and enough size around it to be able to compete with anybody, because they can score with anybody. It's just a matter of kind of on the other end. And in the grittier games, how does that look? But they've proven they can win close games. They almost lost to Cal Baptist, who Cal Baptist is, we'll talk about later, who's flying under the radar. But yeah, I like those 2 teams as kind of sneak it in, and we talked about this too. Utah Valley was a team that snuck in last year, and I think everybody every week was probably thinking like, is this for real? Are they legit? Are they legit? And next thing you know, they're playing for a coach championship, and they actually get it. You know, I think even up until the end, it's like, they're going to be close, but no cigar. I think a lot of people felt like that. Coach Madsen, we didn't feel like that, just so you know, just in case you watch this. But a lot of people felt like that. So I think those 2 teams are in that tier. But then you have kind of the blue bloods in this conference, if you will, that have been on another level. They come with the pedigree. Their players have either experienced it as underclassmen if they're there, or returners, or they've seen it from afar. The coaches have experienced it. So there's a potential matchup if both teams can go unscathed this weekend or the next few days. Next week, they'll play undefeated. It'll be as big of a mid-major matchup that's happened all year. I know Loyola Chicago was a big one with San Francisco. This one would be similar, but conference play, and have a lot of sizzle and a lot of and so it's as Coach Walker said when he was on the other day. He said it's not a rivalry yet. That was last year, but now they've won the last few times, so it is now actually an official rivalry. So I look forward to the potential of that too.
Well, I mean, it's like you said. You hope that nothing against Sam Houston, nothing against FSFA. You just kind of hope that New Mexico State and Grand Canyon get through unscathed, because that game will be talked about across the nation and bring so much attention to the WAC. Like, if that happens, because of the way both teams have been this year. I mean, Mexico State has a win over Davidson. They beat Washington State on the road. They swept UTEP. Grand Canyon has the win over San Francisco. I mean, it's just so no offense to Sam Houston or SFA, but I think a lot of fans want those 2 teams to be unscathed when they play next Saturday in Las Cruces. But you got to get through these 2 games this weekend first, Brian. I mean, Jamal Walker said it, like, the focus has to be on tonight first, and then then you can get to it. So we'll have to see. You can't get caught looking forward, especially in this conference, because anybody can beat anybody on any given night.
No doubt. I mean, you've seen it happen even at the highest levels, right? Baylor's number 1 in the country. It feels like they can't be touched. They lose 2 in the same week.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, and it doesn't mean that Baylor isn't good, but Texas Tech is good. Oklahoma State's good, and Oklahoma State wasn't a top 25 team and isn't. So that was not a win that they were expecting. So it can happen at any level, at any point in time in conference play. We've seen Duke lose to Miami. We saw Duke lose to Florida State, which, again, great programs. They're not necessarily – Florida State has been elite as a program. They haven't played elite this year. Miami has been good at times, but, again, that can happen to anybody. I think that's what you love about college basketball.
Well, and Miami just beat North Carolina by 18 last night. So
dominated. That's what I'm saying. You never know in conference play.
Yep.
I do think that those teams are the top 2 teams. And I do think until somebody knocks off the back-to-back champions in this league, meaning respectively both teams, it's hard to get in that elite tier yet. But the top tier with those 4 teams, let's go to the next tier. Tell me what you think about kind of this middle tier of teams that could jump up or could even slide down or may stay right where they are.
It's kind of hard, Brian. Like it's a mess in the middle. I mean, you got Utah Valley there, you got Tarleton, you got Abilene Christian, Stephen F. Austin. I mean, these are like Stephen F. Austin was my number 2 in my preseason picks. Utah Valley was up there. I mean, it just, and so was Abilene Christian. It's so wild. Abilene Christian won their first 2 WAC games on the road. They've lost 4 straight since then. You know, Tarleton, same thing. Like they performed while they were at, what was it, 3-2 or 3-1 going into last week, and then they get blown out by New Mexico State and Grand Canyon. Utah Valley has been up and down.
Injuries? Which teams have injuries and what that are affecting them maybe being in the next tier? I thought I heard something or read something about Abilene maybe having some injuries, and
so Abilene Christian was without Arian Simmons last weekend because of COVID issues, so he stayed home from the road trip. Tarleton lost Shakir Daniel for the season with a knee injury. That was prior to starting WAC play, so they've been missing one of their floor generals. You know, so they're going to deal with that all season. But Utah Valley's without Trey Woodbury, who was their leading scorer from last year. He's been out with a knee injury, hasn't played at all this season yet. And Justin Harmon, who had 24 points against BYU in that win, you know, back on December 1st, he's been out with a wrist injury. They're hoping to get him back in the next few weeks so that he can get some time and get ready for WAC Vegas. California Baptist, I mean, they're not in the middle tier, but they've been dealing with sickness and injuries right now. Taron Armstrong, one of the best freshmen up until has been out with sickness. He's out. He's been out since the Chicago State game. So Stephen F. Austin, they're banged up too. They lost Roddy Ware with a knee injury that he sustained against Liberty. So, I mean, every team's banged up. Every team's dealing with COVID. I don't want to say that. I mean, some of them are significant. You know, Roddy Ware was one of the leading scorers for the Lumberjacks. Shakir Daniel, like I said, excuse me, was the floor general. So it's just one of those tiered things. You have to overcome it. Like, you're going to deal with that throughout the season. You have to overcome it. Next man up mentality. And it just seems like teams aren't in that middle tier, haven't been able to adjust to that right now because, you know, they're not performing at the level that they should be. The problem with Tarleton is I think their legs are going to catch up to them because their starters are averaging almost 38 minutes a game.
Yeah.
I mean, up until this past weekend, Montre Gibson had played every minute of every conference game. Like, you just can't, even at this young age, you still can't do that to guys. They have to get a break.
Sustain it and play at a high level and expect to not have some, little nicks and bruises, and even just to perform, you're just not going to have the same bounce, the same effectiveness. And, we all know that he has a grind type of style coaching and practice culture and all of that. So there's no telling how that's looking, but they don't have a lot of depth. And I think that's partly why he's working to win so badly. He's just riding those guys until he can't anymore in that particular instance. I think with a lot of teams that are in the middle, they're just looking for that consistency. I think a lot of these teams will be great at home, as you see in college basketball. The road is a little bit harder because you have less room for error, right? You have less margin to make mistakes. So I think those things probably factor in with these teams a lot. And just having one guy out doesn't help you. I know. So Nigel Hawkins, I got to coach at UTEP. He's a really good player for Stephen F. Austin. And in their scrimmage season, I mean, he's getting 25. He's playing at a high level, and he breaks his hand. Yep. So he hasn't played. It's a significant role for them. He hasn't played a lot. So even though he's not injured now, he's coming back from injury, and now you're playing your best opponents. So he didn't really get a chance to tune up. So I know that's probably affecting them a little bit. But, this middle tier, the thing about it, I think, to watch even as it keeps going is, again, watch how they play at home, because Sam Houston's one loss is to Tarleton. And if I'm not mistaken, it was at Tarleton, correct?
So Sam Houston beat Tarleton.
Oh, they did?
It was Stephen F. Austin that lost at Tarleton.
Okay.
But Stephen F. Austin won at Abilene Christian. So it's like No, sorry. Tarleton did beat Sam Houston.
Yeah, they beat them
Excuse me.
75-64.
It's all the purple, Brian. There's so much.
I know, and they're all in Texas, except Grand Canyon. The purple in Texas will get you got ACU, you got SFA, and you got Tarleton. So purple and white will get you a little bit confused. But yes, Tarleton beat the head coach for I don't know if WAC followers know this, but the head coach for Sam Houston State, Jason Hooten, he graduated. He's an alum of Tarleton State, and there was some rumors and probably some conversations that happened when Tarleton State opened, when they were still in the South, when Sam Houston State was still in the Southland, and that job was open at Tarleton. I'm sure there was some conversation to try to see if they wanted to bring him home. We're glad he stayed, Sam Houston State. No disrespect to anybody, but that's his alma mater. So going back, I remembered that, like, okay, he went back home. That's going to mean something to play them the first time Division I. That's their only loss. So they have the capability at home. A lot of these teams will, because also what happens at home, your role players play at a little higher level at home.
Yep.
Your 1 and 2 and 3, they normally play pretty well home or road, but your role guys, your guys off the bench, your fifth leading scorer all of a sudden is the leading scorer. Those things happen at home a lot more than they happen on the road. So I think that's a little bit with this middle tier. And I think you talked a little bit about the lower tier. We don't have to spend too much time, but a lot of these teams are just struggling to get the momentum. I will give shout out to Chicago State. And
I was waiting for that
conference win. I mean, we got to get them on the show. I'm gonna work on that. We're gonna work on that.
I love the Cougars, man. I'm all over them.
We got to get some phone text going on. We got to get them on the show, because it's really impressive what they've done in a short amount of time. I mean, here I am. I was blessed to call the Wyoming San Jose game last night in the Mountain West, right? Well, San Jose has traditionally been a lot like Chicago State.
Yep.
Just hasn't been able to get a win in league play, has kind of not really been competitive. And Tim Miles is over at San Jose State and doing a good job. They've got 7 wins, which is more wins than they've had in a long time. But conference play, they really haven't been close until last night. They haven't had a close conference game. So that's, again, more credit to what Chicago State is doing, because they already have 2 conference wins, and those are not easy to come by. And they're going to get more. They're not done at 2.
Right. And let me tell you what, the mentality that Gerald Gillian has, like I talked to him on the Straight Outta WAC podcast. It was after they beat CBU. Elliot Charles, the AD, hit me up and said, we need to get Coach Gillian on your podcast. And I asked him about playing for Las Vegas and how, there's 10 teams vying for, or 11 teams vying for 10 spots. He's like, I already booked our trip to Las Vegas. Like, I'm already confident that we're going.
I love it.
Like that to me, that's just a change in culture and mentality.
No doubt.
And 6 wins, all against Division I opponents.
Yep.
They've got 2 wins in conference play, which is the first time since they've joined the WAC.
Right.
So, and like you said, they're not done. They haven't. And what's even more impressive, Brian, is that win at Lamar, they weren't even healthy. They didn't have half their guys.
Right.
So, yeah, I love what Chicago State's doing. I really do. And here's the thing. That bottom tier of the WAC, it's not like it's bad basketball.
No.
Like, Dixie State's exciting. Like, if you watch their win over California Baptist, they went on an 11-0 run in the final minute to win that game.
Right.
California Baptist, they've been in every game, and they knocked off Utah Valley at home.
Right.
I mean, and they should have beat Seattle. I'm not going to lie. They should have beat Seattle. All I needed was a defensive rebound. UTRGV plays a fun style of basketball, getting up and down the floor.
Yeah, scored 85 points in their win against Chicago State, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's not like it's bad basketball. It's just they're missing – those teams at the bottom are missing guys. They're the ones missing the guys the most.
Right.
Or like at Dixie State, they just don't have the depth that other teams do.
Right.
Lamar hasn't been healthy all season long.
And we know Coach Brooks, again, he's done a phenomenal job in his career everywhere he's been, and has won and won and won some more. That's all he knows is winning. And
they were close to knocking off SFA the other night too.
I know, that's what I'm saying. And they haven't really been full strength. So this league is only going to get more exciting as it goes. And I think the part that's challenging is staying up at people look at the standings. It's human nature. And knowing where other people are you going to be excited about looking ahead for the next game? That always happens in conference play. And in this league, definitely some teams can sneak up. One team we haven't talked a lot about is the defending co-champs. I'm going to give you a quick 30 to 60 seconds on what you think about Utah Valley. Obviously, they have one of the best players in the league, who's a dominant force. They had an injury early on, I want to say when they played Wyoming, to one of their better guards, the JUCO transfer. I'm drawing a blank on his name, but
Justin Harmon.
Yeah, I believe he's back now. Is that correct? And how are they looking, and what's going on with them?
So Utah Valley, obviously, you mentioned it. They have Fardaws Amac, who's averaging almost 20 points a game and 14 rebounds. Reigning WAC Player of the Year, reigning Defensive Player of the Year in the WAC. They're missing Trey Woodbury. I love the Wolverines. I love what Mark Madsen's doing, but they don't have that guy that can take somebody off the dribble and get to the rim, or that can, pull up on a jumper with ease or shoot over somebody, which was what Trey Woodbury could do. Justin Harmon injured his hand in practice before the Southern Utah game. That was right after they beat BYU, and he had 24 points in that win. And he hasn't been back. He's battling, through it. They're hoping to get him back in the next week or two.
Yeah.
So that'll be a big piece to have back. He was their sixth man coming off the bench. But they have pieces in place. They just got to be consistent. Like you talked about, Blaze Neild had a heck of a run in their two WAC opener games at home. Right. And he had 27 points against Abilene Christian and couldn't miss from three. But then you go on the road at Seattle and at California Baptist, and he wasn't even close to that 20-point range.
Right.
So it's just a matter of being consistent. The Wolverines are a good squad, but just got to be consistent. And guys got to knock down shots to take pressure off of Fardaws Amac in the paint.
Right. And I'll say, I think with Woodbury – no, I'm sorry, not Woodbury. The young man from junior college.
Justin Harmon.
Harmon, yes. Excuse me. Sorry, Justin. A lot going on. So, I went to practice that day after Southern Utah lost, and BYU they had just beaten prior, and he had such a monster game. And I think even early in their team, it sounds like he was such a big part of their identity and kind of gave them something that no one else has, that kind of grit and toughness. And I believe he may be from Chicago, if I'm not mistaken, before he was in junior college. So I think it just kind of brings a different edge that they're missing. I think it sounded like they were concerned with Southern Utah, and then they played Wyoming. And so I know they've kind of been in an inconsistent space since then. But that's one of those guys on the road that probably brings you that extra firepower that we talk about. So speaking of firepower, let's acknowledge some players before we shut this thing down. Obviously, we have a ton of big matchups starting tonight, so people just tune in, look at your ESPN app. You'll see the matchups. It's pretty simple. We'll close our last couple minutes of the show and talk about some of the players to highlight.
Well, Bri, I have a couple on my list. California Baptist forward Dan Aachen, UMBC transfer, quietly averaging 13.2 points and 8.2 rebounds, and he's shooting 65% from the field. This guy is they call him the Danimal at California Baptist for the physicality he brings, the athleticism. He's able to finish above the rim. I mean, the biggest issue with him is he's got to stay in the game. Can't foul out. He fouled out with 8 minutes left to go against Utah Valley. He's got to stay in the ball game. He had a big night against Seattle, another double-double. It's just impressive what he's been able to do and thrive in his role with the Lancers. I'm going to go again to Seattle. Cameron Tyson. We knew he was a one of the best three-point shooters in the conference coming in. He's a second leading scorer for Seattle at 16.1 points per game, shooting 43% from three-point land. In the 3 wins this week for the Red Hawks, on Wednesday, Saturday, and then Monday, he hit 16 three-pointers in those 3 games. He had 5 3-pointers in the second half against Utah Valley to lead the Red Hawks to that win last Wednesday. He hit 7 on Saturday against Dixie State. So it's just been very, very impressive. All wins for the Red Hawks and their 4-0 WAC play. And then my last one, Montre Gibson from Tarleton. We talked about the legs. We talked about the minutes played. He's playing nearly 95% of the available minutes for the Texans. He's played 38 plus minutes in all of their conference games thus far, averaging 15.2 points and shooting 43% from the field. Just amazing, with his legs under him. And then I'm going to talk about one freshman, Jelani Stone from California Baptist. I watched this kid against Utah Valley. Big, strong, physical, athletic, young man that can get up above the rim. He was able to block some shots and was really impressive. He's a WAC freshman of the week, obviously. He's not stuffing the stat sheet right now because he's still trying to get his footing at the Division I level. But he's going to be really good for California Baptist going forward. And I talked to Braden Bell, their play-by-play voice. And so those are a couple names to think about as we get going this weekend, this Thursday. And there's a lot of names that I could have thrown out there, but those are just four that I took a look at, Brian. I'm excited to see what they do this week.
Yeah, good ones. I'll just kind of spit off some names and kind of go not necessarily into their stats, but just kind of what they do for their team. Johnny McCants, I love. Coached against him. He's a dog without question. He's been in the tournament. He knows what that program's about, and I know he's just playing with a different ferocity and a different doesn't necessarily care about his points, but his defense and his ability to block shots, he's one of the best at his block shot rate in the country.
I want to point something out real quick about Johnny McCants too. He's going to be a dad, and so that's kind of weighing on his mind too as he's finishing up his basketball, playing days at New Mexico State, and just a humble young man that loves playing for the Aggie fans.
Yeah, no doubt. Got to give him his shout. I think he's doing his best to will his team he wants to finish the right way, kind of when we talk to James Miller. I think that's important to him. I'll do a quick one for Chicago State. Just quick shout out to Brandon Betson, 38 minutes, 18 points in their win against Lamar. So, got to shout out some guys that are leading their team to a win. I would say Lampley for Sam Houston State, if I'm not mistaken, as a returner, was there prior to, and JC transfer, and just an important player to continue to help them win. He's a steady force. I think he's the Batman or the Robin to the Batman, so to speak. Excuse my language. And then Blackshear and Woods. I don't know if you can say which one is Batman and which one is Robin for Grand Canyon, but they're as good of a backcourt as there is, not only in this conference, but in this mid-major basketball period. They're really good. They can score. They can make plays. They don't care who gets the credit. They're not fighting over whose team it is. And anytime you have two playmaking guards that can make shots and make plays like that, opponents are in for some trouble. But that is our wrap. We said we're going to be right at 29 minutes. Any last thoughts for Kyle? Any last thoughts for you till we get back next week?
Nope. Just looking forward to a fun Thursday and Saturday of WAC hoops. And hopefully, every game is played. We know COVID has created some chaos, but hopefully every game's played this weekend because there's some good ones, a lot of implications. Because remember, the top two seeds for the WAC tournament get a bye to the semifinals. So the regular season actually means a lot more than people think it does. And it's going to be fun.
Absolutely. And if you don't know, your sleep, WAC Hoops Digest. Follow, go check it out. You know what the drill is. Until next week, we'll see you then.